The day we buried my father was the day my family tried to bury me too. My name is Addison Parker. My legacy wasn't just a farmhouse. It was Parker's orchard, every root, every branch, every apple. It was my whole life. But when the will was read, my father, the man who taught me everything, had supposedly given it all to my Uncle Marcus. It was a lie, a forgery. They stole my inheritance and my father's name. They thought I would break, that I'd just walk away. They didn't know my father left me one last message. They didn't know that to get my legacy back, I'd have to unearth a secret that would destroy them all. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The black twig apple is almost purple in the flat October light. Its skin's so dark, it seems to drink the sky. I twist it from the branch, rub the autumn dust from its skin on my jeans, and take a bite. The snap is perfect, a clean fracture that echoes in the quiet of the test row. The taste hits me sharp, bright acid, then a wave of honey and deep wine. It finishes with a tannic bite, a bitterness that grounds it. Perfect. This is my art, the alchemy my father taught me. He always said, "Addie, anyone can grow an apple. The magic is in listening to it." This apple is telling me it will be the soul of our new winter cider. This row is my sanctuary, the only place left on this land that still feels like mine. It's the only place I can still see him. 6 months ago, right here, he stole this exact apple from my hand, his laugh booming across the rows. Patience. "Addie," he'd said, his eyes crinkling. "You can't rush perfection." He was solid, all sun-worn flannel and the smell of earth. A heart attack, they said. Quick, no warning. 1 minute he was the strongest man I knew, the next he was just gone, leaving me alone in a world tilted off its axis. The crunch of tires on gravel shatters the memory. A brand new gunmetal gray luxury truck pulls to a stop at the end of the row, its engine an obnoxious purr. My cousin Julian Thorne steps out. He doesn't belong here. He's all crisp polo shirts and loafers, a city slicker playing farmer. He's 32, 2 years my senior, and now somehow the VP of operations. He waves a tablet at me, his smile not reaching his eyes. "There you are. We're not running a farmer's market, Addie. Uncle Marcus wants the Q4 projections, and he says your new experimental recipe is cost prohibitive. We need to focus on volume." "It's not an experiment, Julian. It's the new flagship cider. It's what we do." "It's what Dad did." He corrects me, the condescension so thick I could choke on it. "It's a hobby. Marcus is running a business. Try to keep up." He gets back in his truck, the one Parker's orchard and cidery paid for, and speeds off, kicking up dust that settles on the leaves. I clench the half-eaten apple in my hand, my knuckles white. A hobby. 30 years of my life learning every root, every branch, every nuance of fermentation, and he calls it a hobby. I walk back toward the main house, the familiar century-old farmhouse that now feels like an occupied territory. It's cold. Dad's muddy boots are gone from the porch. The laughter is gone. In its place is my uncle Marcus Thorne, my father's brother. He's all polished suits and cold spreadsheets. He's the new CEO. He never liked the dirt, but he's always loved the money. And my mother, Eleanor, she's just a ghost. She drifts through the rooms, lost in a fog of grief so dense she can't see what's happening. She signs whatever Marcus puts in front of her, her hand trembling just to be left alone. I see her now through the kitchen window, staring at a teacup that's long gone cold. The will reading 2 months ago was the first real betrayal. It was in Marcus's lawyer's office, all dark wood and the smell of old paper. I sat there numb, expecting to hear the words that would confirm my life's work, expecting to be given the reins. Instead, the lawyer read in a monotone that my father, David Parker, had left his 51% controlling interest in the company, not to me, his only child, but to his brother Marcus. I was left a trust fund, a small, insulting sum payable on my 35th birthday. The room spun. I looked at Marcus, who put on a solemn face and patted my hand. "Don't you worry, Addison. Your father knew you weren't ready for the pressure. I'll take care of everything. I looked at my mother, but she was just weeping silently into a handkerchief. It felt like a posthumous slap from the man I adored. How could he? How could the father who called me his legacy cut me out with a sterile legal document? It didn't make sense. It couldn't be real. Now Marcus is moving fast. He's already in talks to sell Vintner's Collective, a soulless beverage conglomerate from California, wants to buy us gut the orchards and turn the cidery into a high-volume bottling plant for their alcopop. He's already started trimming the fat, which means firing men who worked this land with my father for 40 years, men who taught me how to drive a tractor. He's cutting out the heart of this place, the community that built it, and he's doing it with a smile. I stop at the end of the hall, outside my father's study. The door is locked. Marcus declared it off-limits the day after the funeral. We need to preserve the integrity of the company files, he'd said, pocketing the key. My hand rests on the cold brass knob. I can smell his pipe tobacco and old books through the wood. My heart aches with a grief so sharp it steals my breath. But underneath it's something new, a cold, unfamiliar poison, suspicion. I rattle the knob harder than I mean to. The sound is pathetic weak against the heavy door. This is all wrong. The will, the sale, the locked door. My father would never do this. He would never betray me. He would never betray his life's work. Someone else did. I'm in my apartment in town, a small, sterile box I rented when the main house started to feel like a morgue. The mail is just junk bills and this. A small, padded envelope stiff with cardboard shoved into my box. No return address, just Addison Parker in blocky, unfamiliar handwriting. My stomach clenches. I tear it open right there in the lobby. Inside, bubble wrap. And inside that two things. A small, old-fashioned skeleton key, its brass muted with age, heavy and cold in my palm. And a single index card, folded in two. I open the card. The handwriting isn't unfamiliar at all. It's his. My father's unmistakable slanted script, the D in his initials pressing hard into the paper. My breath catches. It's a message. He's forgotten the foundation. He's forgotten her. DP. I read it 5 times. 10. The lobby seems to fall away. This isn't grief, it's electricity. A jolt that clears the fog that's been choking me for 2 months. This isn't a remnant of the past, it's a map, a call to arms from beyond the grave. He is Marcus. He's forgotten something. The foundation. What foundation? The company's, the houses, and her. Who is she? This key. It's small, ornate. Not for a door. It's for a lock. A small private lock. I grab my jacket, my hands shaking, but not with fear, with purpose. I know exactly who I need to see. My car eats up the miles past the polished, corporate-looking entrance of Parker's Orchard and deep into the county where the roads get rough and the asphalt cracks. I pull up to a small, neglected farm, the paint peeling off the barn and the fences sagging. This is Silas Croft's place. He was my father's best friend. They grew up together thick as thieves. He was the orchard manager for 40 years, the real brains of the operation, until Marcus fired him the day after the funeral. Restructuring, he'd called it with a sympathetic smile. Silas is the definition of American resilience. He's 60-something, grizzled, tough as an apple root, and loyal to the bone. He's on his porch trying to fix a broken tractor part, his hands black with grease. He sees my truck, and his face weathered as old leather softens. Addie, you look like you've seen a ghost. I think I just heard from one, I say. I don't waste time. I sit across from him on the rickety steps and hand him the key and the note. He wipes his hands on a rag, looks at the key first, his bushy eyebrows drawing together. Then he reads the note, his hands still. His face darkens, turning to stone. The foundation, he muses, his voice a low rumble. He can't mean. He looks from the note to the key, a terrible sudden understanding dawning in his eyes. This key. I've seen it. God, I haven't seen this in 30 years. It's for his old roll-top desk, the one his father gave him, the one in his study. The study, I say the word like ice. Marcus keeps it locked. Of course he does. Silas scoffs, his voice bitter. That's where David kept everything that mattered. I'm going in tonight. The words are out before I can second-guess them. The old Addison, the one who just wanted to make cider and walk the rows, is gone. This new one is a thief. Silas looks at me, really looks at me, and a slow, grim smile spreads across his face. Good, that's David's girl. Marcus and Julian are at a steak dinner with the Vintners Collective reps. I heard them talking, trying to close the deal. They'll be gone for hours. Okay, Silas says, standing up, the stiffness of his bad knee obvious. He's all in. They'll have the new security system running. Marcus isn't stupid. The main gate has a camera, and the house alarm is tied to the grid. He walks to his old truck and pulls a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters and a tool bag from the back. I'll create a distraction. A little electrical problem. Cut the power to the main gate and the house's alarm panel. It'll look like a simple short. I can give you 20 minutes max before the system reboots to its battery backup. 20 minutes. I nod. It's all I need. Midnight. The orchard is black, the moon just a sliver of bone. No lights at the main gate. No friendly glow from the farmhouse. Silas did his job. The silence is absolute, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the gravel drive. I'm a trespasser in my own home. I slip in through the back pantry window, one my dad always left unlocked, a habit Marcus hadn't discovered. The house is still stale. The air is wrong. It smells like Marcus's cheap cologne, not my father's pipe tobacco. I'm standing in the hall outside the locked study door. My heart is a hammer against my ribs. I don't need to pick the lock. I still have my house key. Marcus, in his arrogance, only ever locked the deadbolt from the inside when he was in there. He never bothered to lock the simple knob. I turn the knob. The door swings open with a soft snunk. I'm in. I hit the beam of my small flashlight. It's all there, his books, his globe, the faint smell of his life, and the desk. The massive dark wood roll top. I run my fingers along the side, searching for what Silas described. It's not a keyhole on the front. It's hidden, carved into the ornate wooden scrollwork on the right-hand side. My fingers find it. A small round hole, almost invisible. My hands are shaking. I slide the cold skeleton key into the lock. It fits. I turn it. It resists, then gives way with a loud metallic click that echoes like a gunshot in the silent house. I pull my hand back. A section of the carved wood pops open, revealing a dark secret compartment. My flashlight beam finds the dark, shallow hole. I reach inside, my fingers brushing against. Not a document box, not a stack of papers, but a book. I pull it out. It's a thin, leather-bound ledger, the kind you buy at an old stationery store. The dark brown leather is soft worn at the corners. My father's initials, DP, are embossed in faded gold in the bottom corner. It's not a will. It's a journal. My heart hammers a painful, heavy beat against my ribs. This is more private, more dangerous. I flick on the small desk lamp, its green shade flooding the desk in a pool of light, casting the rest of the room in shadow. I open the first page. His handwriting. The same strong, slanted script from the note. I flip past pages and pages of notes on apple hybrids, weather patterns, soil, pH, fermentation, notes, his entire life's work. And then, about a year ago, the tone changes. The entries are no longer about apples. They're about Marcus. October 14th. The entry starts. Marcus is pushing again. He wants to sell. He flew in, the Vintners Collective reps gave them the grand tour. I told him no. I told him this place is for Addison. It's her birthright. He doesn't get it. He just sees the bottom line. I swallow, my throat dry. I can feel the tears welling hot and fast. He was protecting me. The man in the forged will wasn't him. This was. October 20th. Marcus won't let it go. We had a terrible fight. He brought up the past favor, said I owed him, said he took the fall for me all those years ago, and it was time to be paid back. He doesn't understand. The debt isn't to him, it's to God. It's a debt that can never be paid. November 3rd. He's leveraging me, using my guilt. He knows it's the one weapon that can break me. He says if I don't agree to the sale, he'll tell Eleanor, he'll tell Addison, he'll ruin the memory of me just to get his payday. He knows I can't bear that. But I can't sell. I won't. This orchard isn't just a business. It's the only thing I've ever built that's clean. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely hold the page. What guilt? What weapon? What past favor? I read on my eyes, flying across the page, my heart pounding so loud I'm afraid it will wake the dead. I flip the page. The next entry is dated weeks later. The handwriting is different. Jagged forced the ink bleeding through the paper. December 1st. He won't stop. He's forgotten. He's forgotten what that night cost. He's forgotten her. 35 years. I see it every time I close my eyes. Spring 1988. I was 17, he was 18. Marcus was always reckless. He'd stolen a bottle of whiskey from Dad's cabinet. We were flying down the old river road in Dad's truck. Too fast. It was dark, no moon. I stop. I can't breathe. My stomach turns to a knot of pure ice. We came over that blind hill by the old mill, and there she was, just a girl walking on the shoulder. Marcus was laughing, looking at me, not the road. I yelled. He swerved. The sound of the impact. It wasn't loud. A soft, sickening thud. We skidded to a stop. Marcus killed the lights. "We have to go," he whispered, his voice shaking. "We have to go, now." I looked back. She was just a shape in the ditch. I wanted to go back. I swear to God I did. But I was a coward. I was 17 and I was terrified. We drove home. We never said a word. A cold sweat breaks out on my forehead. No, Dad, no. This can't be real. December 2nd. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. She was 16. We didn't kill her. Thank God. But we might as well have. The accident destroyed her hip, crippled her. She'd never walk right again. Dad, my grandfather, figured it out. He saw the dent on the truck. He saw the terror in my eyes. He handled it. He went to the Jenkins family. They were poor but proud. He paid them a huge sum of money, enough to buy their silence. He gave Marcus a second chance. He buried the police report, called in favors with the county sheriff. The Jenkins family, they took the money. They had to. They had other kids to feed. But the town treated them like pariahs, like they'd profited off their own daughter's tragedy. And we just went on. Marcus went to college like nothing happened. I stayed here and tried to build something that wasn't rotten to its core. He's forgotten her, Sarah Jenkins, the note from the envelope. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a name. It was a person. My father's grief, the melancholy. I'd always sensed in him the quiet moments he'd stare at the horizon, the way he was always trying to give back to the community. It wasn't just the weight of the business. It was this monstrous, suffocating secret. And Marcus, my uncle, like he was using it. He was using a crippled woman's lifelong pain as a bargaining chip to get rich. The outrage is so sudden and hot, it makes me sick. I feel the bile rise in my throat. This wasn't just about a company. This was about atonement. This entire orchard, his obsession with it, it was his penance. My eyes jump to the last entry. The date is a punch straight to the gut. April 10th, the day before he died. The handwriting is firm again, resolved. The handwriting of a man who had made a decision, April 10th. Marcus is threatening to expose me if I don't sell. He's twisting the story. He's telling the board I was the one who wanted to flee, that I was the one who pressured him. He'll poison Addison against me even in death. God forgive us all. I can't live with this shame anymore. I've made things right, just in case. I've put the real will, the one my lawyer drew up last month, with the foundation of our atonement. Silas will know. He's the only one who knows the whole truth. He's the only one I trust. He'll help Addie. She'll know what to do. The real will. I knew it. I knew he wouldn't do this to me. The will they read was a fake, a forgery. Marcus had faked the will to seize control, all while blackmailing my father to force a sale. And when my father wouldn't break, What? Did he die of a heart attack, or did the pressure finally kill him? I snapped the ledger shut. My 20 minutes are long gone, but I don't care. I walk out of the study, out of the house, leaving the front door wide open. I don't even try to be quiet. I'm shaking, but it's not fear. It's a white-hot, righteous fury that burns away the grief. I'm in my truck, speeding the tires, spitting gravel, the engine screaming in the pre-dawn light. The sun is just starting to bleed pink and orange over the horizon, but I feel nothing but cold. I don't even knock. I burst into Silas's farmhouse. He's at the kitchen table nursing a cup of coffee, looking like he hasn't slept a wink. He sees my face and stands up. He forged the will, I say, my voice hoarse, unrecognizable. I slam the leather ledger down on the table. He forged it. And he's been blackmailing my father for 35 years. Silas doesn't look surprised. He looks relieved, as if a burden he's been carrying has finally been shared. He opens the ledger, and his eyes scan the last few entries. His face, already weathered, seems to age another 10 years. He nods slowly. I knew most of it, he says quietly, his voice a low rumble. David told me about the accident years ago. He carried that weight every day of his life. He was a good man who did a terrible thing, and he never forgave himself. But this? He taps the page about the blackmail, using it against him. That's a different kind of evil. The will, I say, my voice shaking with rage. He said he put the real will with the foundation of our atonement. He said you'd know. Silas's eyes lift from the book and meet mine. The sadness in them is profound. The foundation of our atonement, he repeats. He stands up, his joints popping in the quiet kitchen. Yes, I know. He walks to the window, looking out at the rising sun as it paints the sky. In 1988, the summer after Sarah, your father came to me. He was a wreck, a ghost. He said he needed to build something, with his hands, something to pray in. He turns back to me. We built a small stone chapel on the far edge of the property in the old-growth woods overlooking the river. He called it a meditation spot for the family, but it wasn't for the family. It was for him. He and I. We built that whole thing, just the two of us, all summer. He built the foundation with his own hands, mixed every bag of mortar, set every single stone. It was his penance. Marcus? I whisper, my blood running cold. Does he know about it? Marcus! Silas scoffs, a bitter, sharp sound. Marcus never set foot in those woods unless he was hunting deer. He thought David was crazy, wasting his time. He hasn't thought about that chapel in 30 years. It's hidden by the old growth. He stops and his words hang in the air. A new terrible urgency floods his face, draining the blood from it. Oh God, the old growth! What? I demand, grabbing his arm. Silas, what? He's already grabbing his heavy jacket and his keys from the hook by the door. He started clearing that land. I heard him telling Julian just yesterday. A logging sale to free up quick capital before the vintner's deal closes. The cruise started yesterday. He looks at me, his eyes wide with a new horror. We have to go, now. Silas's old farm truck rattles so hard my teeth ache. He's pushing the engine, redlining it as we fly down a rutted, muddy back road that hasn't been used in a decade. "It's faster!" he yells over the engine's scream. "Cuts off 2 miles!" I grip the dashboard, the leather ledger from the study digging into my ribs. The air is sharp with the smell of diesel and damp earth. And something else. Faint, but growing. The high, angry whine of chainsaws. It's a mechanical scream that cuts through the morning, and it's coming from where we're going. They're already there. I breathe, my stomach clenching. Floor it, Silas. He skids the truck to a stop at the end of the overgrown path, nearly hitting an ancient oak. "This is as close as we get," he says, grabbing a tire iron from under his seat. "For what?" I ask. "For insurance," he grunts. We plunge into the woods. The sound is deafening now. The scream of the saws is punctuated by the thunderous crack and crash of falling trees. They're close, too close. The smell of pine sap and exhaust is thick. We're running branches, whipping my face, my lungs burning. "Where is it?" I pant. "Just here." Silas grabs my arm and pulls me left through a thicket of wild rhododendrons. And then, we're there. We burst into a small clearing. It's beautiful, or it was. It's a small chapel no bigger than a shed built of river stone and covered in a thick blanket of dark green ivy. It looks ancient, like it grew here. But 100 yards away through the trees I can see them. A bulldozer, bright yellow. 2 men with chainsaws, their backs to us, sawdust flying. They're working toward us. The ground shudders as another giant pine crashes down. They haven't seen us. Not yet. Silas shoves the chapel's heavy oak door. It groans open on rusty hinges. The air inside is cold, musty, smelling of stone and mice. It's simple. A single wooden bench. A small, unadorned stone altar at the front. Dust motes dance in the one beam of light coming from a small, stained glass window. It's peaceful, but the sound of the saws is a constant vibrating threat. "He built this," Silas says, his voice rough with emotion. He runs his hand over the altar. His penance. He kneels, his bad knee cracking, and feels along the base. "He carved this himself." His fingers find a purchase, a slight indentation in the stonework. He grunts, pulling hard. Nothing. "Damn it!" He plants his feet and heaves. There's a grinding sound. Stone on stone. The entire altar top pivots, scraping a groove in the dusty floor. It reveals a hollow space, a dark cavity cut into the stone foundation, and inside, a black metal document box. My hands are shaking. I reach in and pull it out. It's heavy. It's locked. "The tire iron," I say. Silas hands it to me. I jam the chisel end into the seam and put all my weight on it. The cheap lock pops with a pathetic snap. I throw the lid back. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, is a thick sheaf of papers. I rip the cloth away. My eyes scan the header. "Last Will and Testament of David P. Parker." Notarized. Signed. Dated 3 months ago. My heart stops. I flip through the pages, my eyes scanning the dense legal text. "I, David P. Parker, do hereby bequeath my controlling interest of 51% of Parker's Orchard and Cidery to my daughter, Addison Parker." I drop to the bench, the air rushing out of my lungs in a sob I didn't know was there. "He did it, Silas. He left it to me. He trusted me." "Read the rest," Silas says, his eyes on the doorway, the tire iron still gripped in his hand. I read on. The words blur, then snap into horrifying, beautiful focus. "In recognition of a profound and lifelong debt, I hereby establish the Jenkins Trust. This trust shall be funded by and entitled to 40% of all net company profits to be paid annually for the remainder of her natural life to Ms. Sarah Jenkins." My God. It wasn't just an apology, it was restitution, a public binding financial act of atonement. "What about..." I flip to the next page. To my brother Marcus Thorne and my nephew Julian Thorne, I leave a minor share of 5% each. These shares are granted contingently. Should either party or any agent acting on their behalf contest this will or any of its provisions, their shares shall be considered forfeit and be absorbed into the Jenkins Trust. A master stroke. He'd boxed them in. He'd used their own greed against them. He knew even if they found this, they wouldn't dare contest it and risk losing everything. He'd protected me. He'd protected Sarah. What a touching little scene. The voice cuts through the dusty air. I leap to my feet, clutching the will to my chest. Julian Thorne is standing in the doorway. His polo shirt is pristine. He's holding his phone up, recording us, a smug, vicious smirk on his face. The sunlight from the door frames him, turning him into a black silhouette. Breaking into more private property, Addie, wow. He laughs, a short, ugly sound. And you, Silas. I knew you were a snake. I had a feeling you'd try to pull something when I saw the logging crew order, so I told them to start here. He's been playing us. It's over, Julian. I say, my voice trembling but cold. We have the real will. You and your father. You forged the other one. You're finished. Am I? His smirk widens. He steps inside. I don't see a will. I see my crazy cousin and a disgraced employee who just assaulted me. He lowers his phone. Give me the box, Addie. Go to hell. He lunges. Not at me, at the box. He tries to rip it from my hands, but Silas is faster. Silas, old but strong as an oak, shoves him back. Julian stumbles, surprised by the old man's strength. Get out of here, Addison, Silas roars. He shoves me toward the door. Run! Get that to a lawyer. Go! Don't worry about me. Julian's face contorts with pure narcissistic rage. He's not the smart, smug cousin anymore. He's a cornered animal. He tackles Silas, a full-body charge that sends them both crashing into the stone wall. I scramble out the door, clutching the will. I don't look back. I just run. You're not going anywhere, bitch, said Julian, screams from behind me. I plunge into the trees, the path a blur. I can hear him crashing through the underbrush. He's faster than me. I risk a glance back. He's not empty-handed. He's grabbed something. A heavy piece of logging equipment. A cant hook. A 3-foot wooden handle with a massive sharp metal hook on the end used for grabbing and turning logs. He's holding it like a weapon. Like an axe. I'm running, adrenaline searing my lungs. The woods are a green, tearing blur. Branches rip at my face, my jacket. I can hear him shouting, "You're ruining everything, I'll kill you." And then I hear it. Behind me. A sickening thud. A wet, heavy sound like an axe hitting a melon. It's followed by a grunt and the sound of a body falling, crashing through the brush. Silas. I stop, my heart exploding. Silas. I hear Julian laugh, a ragged, breathless sound. One down, Addie, you're next. I turn and run. I run for my life. The will is tight in my hand. My only ally is down, and I'm being hunted in my own woods by my own blood. I burst out of the woods and don't look back. I don't know if Silas is alive or dead. The thought is a shard of glass in my chest, but I can't stop. To stop is to let him die for nothing. I hit the main road, the real will clutched in my hand, my knuckles white. I wave my arms frantically at the first car. I see a startled farmer in a beat-up truck. Please, I scream. Call 911. A man is hurt in the woods. My cousin, he has a weapon. I don't wait for his reply. I just run, cutting across the fields toward town, a 3-mile sprint fueled by pure liquid terror. By the time I make it to the county sheriff's office, gasping for breath, my clothes torn, it's already in motion. Julian the snake must have called them the second he saw me escape. The story I hear at the front desk makes my blood run cold. Julian Thorne has filed an assault charge. He was attacked by Silas Croft, an unhinged former employee, and his emotionally unstable cousin Addison. Silas is already in custody, arrested by the deputies who responded to his 911 call. He's been taken to the hospital with a severe head injury from defending himself. Julian faked the whole thing. He struck Silas, then claimed self-defense. And I am now a person of interest wanted for questioning in the assault. They've twisted it all. The will in my hand feels worthless. My only ally is in a hospital bed, or worse, a jail cell. Marcus is winning. He's spinning the narrative so fast I can't breathe. My phone buzzes with an email blast sent to all company shareholders and community partners. Emergency shareholder and community meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Urgent updates on the future of Parker's Orchard and Cidery. He's sensing the end. He's not waiting for me to recover. He's calling a vote. He'll use my assault and instability as proof that the company needs a stable hand, that the sale to Vintners Collective is the only sane option. He's going to liquidate everything, torch the evidence, and walk away clean before I can even get a lawyer to look at my father's will. I find a public defender, a young, tired woman named Maria, in a cramped office above a bail bondsman. I show her the will. Her eyes go wide. This is ironclad Addison. This is a game changer. So we stop him, right? I plead. We file an injunction. Her face falls. We file, yes. But Marcus will contest. He'll claim duress. He'll claim your father wasn't of sound mind. He'll drag this out. Probate a will contest. It could take months, years even. I don't have months, I say, the walls closing in. The meeting is tonight. He's selling it tonight. Then, legally, she sighs, pushing her glasses up. Legally, he'll have sold the assets long before a judge ever sees this document. You'll be left suing a shell corporation for pennies. I stand up, the cheap linoleum sticking to my shoes. I'm terrified. I'm out of options. The law is too slow. The truth is too slow. I have one choice left. It's not the court of law, it's the court of public opinion. I know where I have to go. The house is at the poor end of town, small, worn down, but the front yard is immaculate, filled with defiant, bright flowers. I knock on the door. It opens a crack. A woman in her late 50s peers out. Her hair is graying, pulled back in a tight bun. Her face is a map of exhaustion and old pain. She walks with a severe, rolling limp, her whole body twisting with the effort. She leans heavily on a wooden cane. Sarah Jenkins, her eyes the color of a winter sky, are guarded suspicious. Who's askin'? My name is Addison Parker. My father was David Parker. The name hangs in the air between us, thick and poisoned. Her hand tightens on her cane. I expect her to slam the door to curse me. Instead, she just stares, her face unreadable. I need to show you something. I say, my voice shaking. It won't make it right. Nothing can. But it's the truth. I don't wait for an invitation. I hold up the will, my finger pointing to the clause. I hereby establish the Jenkins Trust. She opens the door. She doesn't read the whole thing. Her eyes just scan the words, her name, the numbers. She reads it once, twice. Her breath hitches. For the first time, those guarded, tired eyes fill with a light. Not tears. Fire. A 35-year-old blaze that's been banked but never extinguished. He knew, she whispers, her voice rough. He knew. I confirm, my own tears finally falling. And my uncle, Marcus. He used your pain to blackmail him. He forged the will. He's trying to sell the company, and he's the one who was driving the truck that night. Sarah Jenkins looks past me at the town she's lived in as a pariah, as a charity case for her entire life. She straightens up, the movement costing her, and looks me dead in the eye. They're having a meeting tonight, she says, her voice no longer a whisper, but a low, dangerous rasp. Yes. Then we'd better not be late. The main cidery hall is packed. I've never seen it this full. It's a cross-section of our entire town. Farmers in muddy boots, local business owners in cheap suits, my father's old employees, the ones who hadn't been fired yet, Standing in the back, their arms cross their faces grim. The air is thick with tension, confusion, and grief. On the small stage at the front, Marcus stands at a podium flanked by his lawyer. Julian is beside him, his arm in a pristine white sling, a perfect portrait of a victim. My mother Eleanor sits behind them, a pale ghost in a black dress, her eyes vacant, staring at nothing. Marcus is in his element. He's all feigned sorrow and quiet strength. A heavy heart. He's saying, his voice resonating with false sincerity. My brother's legacy. These are the hard decisions of leadership, but we must move forward. He paints a picture of a company on the brink of a desperate need for the liquidity Vintner's Collective can provide. And then, he sighs, shaking his head. And then there is the personal tragedy. He gestures to Julian's sling. My own niece, Addison. We all know she's been struggling with her grief. We've tried to help her. But this morning, her instability turned to violence. She and a disgruntled former employee, Silas Croft, trespassed and viciously attacked my son. A low, shocked murmur ripples through the crowd. People are looking at each other. This is the town that watched me grow up. They're confused. I love my niece, Marcus says, his voice breaking just right, but she is not well, which is why I have to ask for this emergency vote. To protect my brother's company, to protect our community, we must approve the sale, tonight. You're lying. My voice cuts through the silence. It's not as loud as I'd intended, but it's as sharp as a shard of glass. The heavy oak doors at the back of the hall are open. I'm standing right there. The crowd turns as one, the faces, shocked, curious, angry. Marcus freezes. His knuckles are white on the podium. Addison, I don't think this is the place. I said you're lying. I walk forward. The crowd parts for me like the Red Sea. I am not alone. To my left is Ben Carter, the 70-year-old editor of the Clackamas County Chronicle, the last independent paper in the valley. He's holding a large old-school camera. And to my right, walking slowly, painfully, her cane thudding on the wooden floor with each agonizing step, is Sarah Jenkins. Marcus's face goes from polished bronze to ash white. He knows that limp. He knows that face. He looks like he's seen a ghost. Julian takes an involuntary step back, his injured arm flinching. I don't stop until I'm at the foot of the stage. I look up at my uncle, the man who stole my life, who silenced my father, who destroyed an innocent woman. Get off the stage, I say. He's speechless. I don't wait. I step up, walk past him, and take the podium. My hands are shaking so violently I can barely stand. I look out at the crowd, my neighbors, my friends, the people of my town. You all knew my father. I start, my voice cracking. I clear my throat. You knew him as a good man, a quiet man, a generous man. And you've been told he cut me, his only daughter, out of his will. You've been told he wanted to sell this place to a corporation. I pull the thin leather ledger from my bag. My father kept a journal. Addison, that's enough, Marcus snarls, finding his voice. He reaches for my arm. Don't touch me. I hiss, my voice filled with a venom I didn't know I possessed. He recoils. I open the ledger. I read. My voice shakes, but it's loud, filling the hall. I tell them everything. I read my father's words, the story of two boys drunk on a dark road, the soft, sickening thud, the girl left in a ditch. Her name, I say, my voice breaking, was Sarah Jenkins. I point to Sarah, who is standing at the foot of the stage, her face a mask of terrible, vindicated sorrow. The entire town turns to look at her. Not with pity as they have for 35 years, but with a dawning collective horror. My Uncle Marcus Thorne was the one driving that truck, I shout, pointing at him. And for 35 years he used that secret, that shame, to blackmail my father. He used it to try and force him to sell this company. The hall is in an uproar. A wave of outrage rolls from the crowd. "Monster!" someone shouts from the back. "Murderer! She's hysterical!" Julian yells, his voice cracking. "She's insane! Look at her!" "I am not hysterical," I roar back, silencing him. My father knew this was coming. He knew what his brother was, and he wrote a new will. I hold up the document, the real will. This is my father's true will. He left the company to me, and he left 40% of its profits to the woman my uncle crippled and left on the side of the road. The chaos is absolute. People are standing, shouting, pointing. Marcus is hyperventilating, his eyes darting to the exits. Julian, in a blind panic, lunges for the will, trying to rip it from my hand. He never makes it. A wall of flannel shirts intercepts him. Two of my father's oldest, most loyal employees, men Marcus had planned to fire next week, grab Julian by the arms. "You're not going anywhere, boy!" one of them growls. Marcus grabs my mother's arm, his final desperate move. "Eleanor, tell them. Tell them she's lying. Tell them she's crazy. You know what David said. Tell them." My mother, a ghost for 3 months, looks at Marcus's snarling, terrified face. She looks at Julian struggling in the arms of the workers. Then she looks at me standing tall, holding the truth in my hand. And she breaks. It's a sound I will never forget. A sob that comes from the deepest part of her soul. "He's the liar," she shrieks, collapsing out of her chair and onto her knees. "It's all true. It's all true, David, my David. He lived with the guilt every single day of his life. And Marcus used it. He threatened us. He threatened to tell everyone. He threatened me. He's a monster. He's a monster. It's over." The confession, raw and ripped from my mother's soul, hangs in the air, damning him more than any document ever could. Ben Carter's camera flashes flash, capturing the scene. "I'm live streaming this, by the way," he says calmly to the 2 uniformed officers who had been hired by Marcus for security and are now pushing their way through the crowd, their faces grim. They're not looking at me anymore. They're looking at Marcus. "Sir," one of them says, his hand on his service weapon. "You need to come with us." Marcus looks at the officer. He looks at the crowd, a sea of hateful, accusing faces. He looks at me. He opens his mouth and collapses, clutching his chest, a strangled, pathetic groan escaping his lips. Whether it's a real heart attack or the coward's last performance, I don't know. And I don't care. He's finished. As the officers surround him and medics are called, I just stand there, shaking the will and the ledger clutched to my chest. The noise in the hall fades to a dull roar. I feel a hand on my arm. I look down. Sarah Jenkins is standing beside me on the stage. She'd pulled herself up step by painful step. She looks at me, the fire in her eyes now banked by tears. She doesn't say anything. She just takes my free hand in hers, and then slowly, starting in the back, the community erupts. It's not just applause. It's a roar of triumph, of release, of justice finally served. It's a victory. It's our victory. 2 days later, the cidery is silent. The Harvest Festival banners are still up, flapping limply in the wind, a bitter mockery of a celebration that never happened. The local news vans are gone, having feasted on our family's carcass and moved on. The silence that's left is heavy, brittle. It's the quiet after the explosion, when all the shrapnel has landed. I'm sitting in my father's study, my study now, and the desk is buried under a mountain of paper. The hospital called this morning. Marcus's heart attack, as I'd suspected, was pure theater. He'd faked it. But the relief was short-lived. He's not in the cardiac wing. He's in a private room under police guard, claiming a complete nervous breakdown. His lawyer is already building a case of diminished capacity. It doesn't matter. The forgery, the fraud, the conspiracy charges, the witness tampering, the list is a mile long. He'll never see the outside of a cell or a psychiatric ward again. And Julian, he's gone, fled the state. He slipped out of the hospital while his father was coding, his fake sling left in a trash can in the parking lot. He left a note for his lawyer resigning from the company and waiving all claims. A rat jumping from a sinking ship. My first act as CEO was to drive to the county jail. My signature bold and angry on the bail release forms was all it took. Silas walked out of the holding cell, a nasty purple bruise swelling over his left eye and a row of stitches gleaming on his scalp where Julian's hook had caught him. He looked exhausted, but he was smiling. "Took you long enough, Addie," he grunted, pulling me into a one-armed hug that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. "And for the record," he whispered, "told you he had a weak chin. He swings like a girl." I laughed, the sound rusty and painful. "Silas," I said, pulling back, I need you. Not just as a friend. I need you back. As general manager. I can't do this alone." He looked at me, the smile fading into that familiar rock-solid loyalty. "I was never not your manager, kid. Now let's go. We've got work to do." My next visit was harder. The county psychiatric ward smells like bleach and quiet despair. My mother was sitting by a window looking out at a brick wall. She's there, voluntarily. The collapse at the meeting had broken the dam, and everything, the grief, the guilt, the denial, had come flooding out. She looked smaller, her skin like paper. "He threatened me, Addie." She whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. "The day after the funeral. He said David had gambling debts. He said the only way to protect the family name was to let him take control, to sell. He said I'd be ruined, you'd be left with nothing." I believed him. I was so weak. I didn't say, "I forgive you." The words wouldn't come. Forgiveness felt cheap. Instead, I took her hand. It was cold. "You can start making it right, Mom. Get better. Then come home. There's a lot of work to do." It's not the relationship we had. That's gone forever. But it's the beginning of a new one, something built on a hard, bitter truth. My lawyers, Maria and a senior partner from her firm, have been living in the study. The real will was filed, and with my mother's sworn testimony and the mountain of evidence from my father's journal, Marcus's claims were extinguished in a single emergency hearing. The company is mine. The Jenkins Trust is as of this morning officially and legally established. I met with Sarah Jenkins and her new lawyer an hour ago right here at this desk. She looked different out of her small, flowered-filled yard. She looked tall. The hunted, victimized look was gone. In its place was a sharp, assessing intelligence. She's no longer a victim. She's a partner. "Your father tried to fix this with money, Addison," she said, her voice clear and strong. She pushed the first quarterly profit and loss statement across the desk. "That was his way. Let's you and I try to fix it with work. I've been a bookkeeper for 20 years just to make ends meet. I know my way around a ledger." She tapped the paper. "And from what I see here, we're in a lot of trouble." She was right. The victory, it turns out, was just the beginning of the war. The real will is valid, but the fight came at a staggering cost. While I was grieving and Marcus was scheming, the company was bleeding out. The lawyers digging into the real books found the truth. Marcus, in his desperate bid to make the company look attractive to Vintners Collective, had been cooking the books for 6 months. But worse, to cover the operational losses he was ignoring, he took out massive, predatory loans. High-interest, short-term debt leveraged against the land itself. The company is leveraged to the hilt. Vintners Collective, upon hearing of the fraud, the scandal, and the pending criminal charges, pulled their offer in a one-sentence email. And the bank, the one that gave Marcus those predatory loans, is no longer interested in restructuring. They see the chaos. They smell blood in the water. A certified letter arrived an hour ago. It sits on top of all the other papers. It's a foreclosure notice. Marcus's bad deals have finally come home to roost. I've won my father's company only to find it's a hollowed-out, rotting shell. We have 30 days to come up with $2 million, or the bank takes everything. The orchard, the cidery, my home, Sarah's trust, Silas's job, they'll take it all. The study has become a war room, but it feels more like a hospice. The three of us, me, Silas, and Sarah Jenkins, are hunched over my father's desk in the dim morning light. The bank's foreclosure notice sits in the middle like a spider. Sarah, who has become our new financial compass, has the real ledgers spread out. They aren't just bad, they are catastrophic. "It's impossible," she says, her voice flat, tapping a column of figures in red ink. Marcus leveraged the land, then took out high-interest bridge loans to cover the payments on the first loans. He was robbing Peter to pay Paul just to keep the books looking inflated for the sale. It's a house of cards. $2 million, Silas mutters, rubbing the stitched cut on his scalp. "In 30 days, we can't get another loan. Not with this financial history. No bank in the state will touch us. So we're done." I say the words tasting like ash. My victory feels hollow, pathetic. I win the battle, I expose the monster, and we all lose the war to a spreadsheet. Silas stares out the window at the rows of ancient apple trees, his face a mask of old pain. "There is one way," he says, his voice so low I barely hear him. "We could sell the back 40. I turn to him horrified. "Silas, no, that's the heritage block, that's Dad's." "I know what it is," he says, his voice rough. "It's the oldest growth, but it's almost 100 acres. The land value plus the timber, it would cover the debt. It would be enough to save the rest of the company. It's the only asset we have that's worth that much that fast." "No." My voice is sharp, final. He flinches. "That's what Marcus would do." I say softer this time, but just as firm. "Selling off pieces to save a dying whole. Sacrificing the soul of the place to save the shell. Those trees are my father's real legacy. They're his library. They're our library. If we do that, we've already lost. I won't do it." "Then what?" Sarah asks, her gaze intense, challenging. "What's the other way, Addison? Because in 27 days, that bank is chaining the gates, and it won't matter what you want to do." I stand up, pacing the room, the rug worn thin by my father's own worries. The answer is right in front of us. It was there all along in the meeting in Sarah's trust. "My father's will," I say, thinking aloud. "It gave profits to Sarah. It gave control to me. But this place, it doesn't just belong to us. It belongs to the town that built it, the community that Marcus and Julian held in contempt." Silas and Sarah look at me confused. "Addie, what are you talking about?" I stop pacing. The idea is a spark, then a blaze. It's crazy. It's radical. It's pure, unadulterated American resilience. I'm not selling to a corporation. I say the idea, crystallizing, my voice gaining strength. And I'm not selling off our assets. I'm selling to everyone. 3 days later, I'm standing on that same stage in the cidery hall. This time, there are no villains, no dramatic confrontations. It's just me, a microphone, and a projector screen showing the brutal red-inked numbers from the bank. The hall is full again, but the mood is sober, anxious. They've all heard the rumors. "I'm not going to lie to you." I start, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "We won. We got the company back. But what we got back was a hollowed-out shell leveraged to the hilt by my uncle's greed." I click to the next slide, the foreclosure notice. "We have 24 days to raise $2 million or that bank from Portland takes it all. They'll sell the land, the equipment, and fire everyone. Parker's orchard will be gone. Forever." A low murmur of despair ripples through the crowd. I let it sit for a moment, let them feel the weight of it. "I've spent the last 3 days trying to get a loan," I continue. "No one will help. I can't save it." I pause, looking out at the faces, my neighbors, my friends, the people who picked these apples as kids. Not alone. So I'm proposing something different. I take a deep breath. I am restructuring Parker's Orchard and Cidery effective immediately. We're going to become a community-supported orchard, a co-op. I'm not asking for donations. I lean forward, my voice dropping, becoming more intense. I'm asking you to invest. I'm selling shares of this company, our company, back to you, to the town. Instead of one faceless corporation, will be owned by 1,000 of us. I'm keeping my 51% controlling interest. My father's will is law. But the other 49%, it's for sale, right now. You won't just be saving the orchard. You'll own a piece of it. You'll get a dividend. You'll have a voice. We'll answer to each other, not to a bank. The silence is absolute deafening. I've just bet my entire future on them. Then a voice from the front row. How much is a share? It's Mr. Henderson who runs the local hardware store. $100, I say. Buy one or buy 1,000, but buy in. A table is set up in the back with Maria, my lawyer, and a stack of stock certificates. For a terrible long minute, no one moves. My heart sinks. I've miscalculated. I've failed. Then Silas stands up from the front row. He walks to the back, his limp pronounced, and pulls out his checkbook. I'm in for my full retirement, he announces, his voice booming across the hall. $50,000. A collective gasp. Then Sarah Jenkins stands. She walks to the table. The Jenkins Trust received its first payment yesterday, she says, her voice clear and strong. A check from the estate clearing your father's back payments. I'm investing all of it, $100,000. It's like the dam breaks. Mr. Henderson is next. Put me down for 10,000. The old employees, the ones Marcus fired, line up, pooling their severance checks. Farmers, teachers, the owner of the local diner, they're all walking to the table, checkbooks in hand. They aren't donating, they're investing, they're fighting, they're buying a piece of their own town's legacy, refusing to let it be erased. The line is out the door. People are cheering, crying, clapping each other on the back. It's not a wake. It's a barn raising. By midnight, we're sitting on the floor of the study, surrounded by checks and pledge forms. Sarah is at the adding machine, her fingers flying. The tape spools out. She clicks the total button. The machine grinds. She looks at me, and for the first time I see her truly smile. The old pain gone from her eyes. 2,147,000, she whispers. We did it, Addison. We did it. The bank is paid off. The orchard is ours. 1 year later, and the air is alive. The sound of a bluegrass band floats over the lawn, weaving through the laughter of kids, and the sweet, heavy scent of baked apples and fresh pressed juice. The harvest festival is bigger than it has ever been. I stand on the porch of the main house, looking out at the sea of people. The first thing I see, the thing that still makes my chest tight with a good solid pride, is the new sign hanging over the main gate. Carved from a massive plank of oak, Silas salvaged it, reads, Parker's Community Orchard and Cidery. It's not just my name anymore. It's ours. The place is thrumming, vibrant in a way it never was when it was just a corporation. It's a living thing, and I can feel its heartbeat in the soles of my shoes. Over by the new smokehouse, Silas, wearing a ridiculous Kiss the Cider Maker's GM apron, is manning a massive BBQ, handing out pulled pork sandwiches to a long line of neighbors. He's laughing, his face ruddy in the heat, the scar on his scalp just a pale, thin line hidden by his graying hair. He catches my eye and raises his spatula in a salute. He belongs here. He's home. Near the pumpkin patch, my mother Eleanor is running the apple bobbing stand. I watch her for a long moment. She's laughing, a real genuine laugh that reaches her eyes. A little girl finally gets an apple, and Mom cheers, her face bright and unburdened. She's back. Not the polished, brittle hostess she was before, or the hollow-eyed ghost she became after. She's someone new. Someone who works the books with Sarah 3 days a week and pulls weeds in the garden with her own hands. Someone real. A chair creaks beside me. Sarah Jenkins sits down, holding 2 mugs of steaming cider. She hands one to me. She is no longer the woman with haunted eyes I met in a worn-down house. She is our chief financial officer, and she is sharper and tougher on our margins than Marcus ever was, but with a foundational fairness that has made every employee fiercely loyal. We're up 20% over last year's projected, she says, her eyes on the crowd, not the ledger she's somehow balancing on her knee. But that's no excuse to get sloppy. That band is charging us 15% too much. I smile. I'll negotiate them down before the next set, ma'am. She finally looks at me, and her own smile is a thing of quiet, powerful beauty. We're partners. We're family. We got a letter from Marcus's lawyer last month. He took a plea deal. Forgery, felony fraud, obstruction of justice. With his failing health and his lawyer's theatrics, he'll be in a low-security prison for the next 5 years. His name is already a curse in this county, a synonym for greed. And Julian? A rumor came back through the grapevine traced from a bounced check that he was last seen washing dishes at a roadside diner in Reno. They are footnotes. Their power is broken, turned to ash, and scattered by the wind. They don't get to have a single thought more. I hold up my mug. Today we unveiled my newest cider, the one that's already sold out with a waiting list for next season. We call it the Foundation. It's made exclusively from the heritage apples in the back 40, the gnarly, thick-skinned, ugly fruit from the trees we saved. The taste is exactly right. It's sharp, complex, and more than a little bitter on the front, but it finishes with a deep, surprising warmth. I look out at the crowd. My crowd. My shareholders, my partners, my friends. I see Mr. Henderson from the hardware store and the old logging crew and the teachers and farmers and families who lined up in this very hall, checkbooks in hand to buy this place back for themselves. My uncle tried to steal my father's legacy, but he never understood what it was. He thought it was the land, the name, the money. He thought it was something you could lock in a safe or forge on a piece of paper or sell to the highest bidder. He didn't know the legacy wasn't the inheritance. It was the work. It was the resilience. It was the community. He wanted the easy harvest, the sweet, polished supermarket apples. He didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the most damaged, gnarled, bitter apples, the ones the frost hits, the hardest, the ones that have to fight to survive, they're the ones that make the strongest cider, the most honest cider. I raise my glass to the crowd. They cheer, raising their own. I take a sip. It's the taste of truth, of atonement, of a future we built from the rotten core of the past. And I finally truly love the taste. And so Addison Parker didn't just reclaim her father's orchard. She rebuilt it, turning a legacy of secrets into a foundation of truth. What did you think of her resilience? Let us know down below. We truly read all of your thoughts. If you appreciate stories of justice, be sure to subscribe. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.